Alright, here I got a video from Real Kai. Title of it is at the top left. Rashad Jamal case exposed. She did a good job at putting the case together on behalf of what's been going on with Rashad Jamal. And I wanted to share my thoughts on what inspired the thoughts that were inspired by this video. I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'm going to play a little bit of it, but everything you need to find it on YouTube is at the top left. But as far as Rashad Jamal is concerned, to me, he represented the dude that could reach the youth that's caught up in these streets. It's caught in the web of the streets. And I know that he was very effective because I have seen the results. Just yesterday, I went to a park and met a dude who was once a criminal in his various ways. Now has the most positive light you can imagine. Used to be introverted, but now speaks to everyone with positivity and light, and has taken on a leadership role from his experiences. And I just knew when I first met him, when he started talking to me, I was like, you watched Rashad Jamal. I just knew he was watching, dude, because it was like the same type of vibe. And I was like, that's beautiful. It was good to go out there and see my people waking up. I grew up in this city, and that was the first time I had went to that park, right? And just seeing that community of people once in the street, now awoken and trying to move in a positive direction, it's beautiful. And that's what of course Rashad Jamal's reach went further than that, but that was the most beneficial for the community, in my opinion, being able to help those in some of the darkest places find their way to the light. And so, of course, the system did what they did. They used his aggression, the fire in him, against him. And I hate that, but it's kind of a price you deal with in this matrix, right? Operating in this matrix. And you would think, because another thing about it is he represented that frontline soldier. People in the streets represent frontline soldiers. They're the ones with that the boldness to step out on the front lines and say, hey, we're not going to stand for it. And that's why there has always been a war on the streets from the power structure. That's why they have always been behind the scenes, manipulating and twisting the narrative on how the streets are viewed. They have always been behind the scenes, making it what it has become, corrupting it. They are the ones that pump the drugs in there. They are the ones that, the intelligence on on how to turn people against themselves. I mean, when it comes to that, this system has mastered it, right? They have mastered it. And Rashad was a threat to that. And so I want to speak on that and try to break it down a little more in depth so people can get a better understanding. When you go back before the crack era and the drug eras and stuff like that, or before the gangs and stuff like that started forming within the black community, the streets represented those that stood for their community and were not participating with the system. They stood for their own independence and taking care of themselves within the system. That was the problem. And think, back then there were no cameras. You're behind enemy lines in their country, operating in their system, trying to do your own thing. They don't want that. And they didn't have to be as careful on how they moved back then versus today, because today there's cameras all over the place. So many ways for their ways to get exposed to the world. They're not really worrying about getting exposed within themselves. Getting exposed to the world can make them look bad in the eyes of other countries, which decreases their trustworthiness. And it's just bad for business, right? So fast forward, rewinding back to then, when you had all these people in the black community coming up with their own ways, legal, healthy, legit ways to uplift and build up their own community, sustain themselves, growing their own food and stuff like that. The power structure had to find ways to disrupt that. And so they started pushing more and more for integratedness, right? Putting themselves closer to them, allowing them to easily infiltrate the community by putting themselves closer. Whether you want to call it gentrifying or whatever, it had a different look back then, right? Back then it was just, hey, we all one country. We do what the government is trying to organize us for our all best interests. At least that's what it was supposed to be about. But it was more so getting closer so that they can be in position to infiltrate, disrupt whatever they needed to do, because they did not want black people to thrive, because they know that black people have the ability to outdo them in pretty much everything. It was a threat to their system, to maintaining their system. Black people have always been that threat. And so the white power structure, I'm not going to say white people in general, but the white power structure have always been behind the scene plotting and scheming on how to take power and control and maintain it while operating around black people. Just like they say, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. That was the case when it comes to white people. They did not want to stay in their own land and do their own thing. They wanted to integrate with black people, take over what they got going on, disrupt what they got going on. It's always been the thing, the scheme, and them controlling the world. Always. And for that power structure, it will always be that way. Which is why, but now that we are able to communicate and wake each other up more effectively than was possible back then, more and more people are aware of the ways of their government and recognizing no matter what color you are, your government is not for you, they're for themselves. They are all based on power and control, period. And so, going back to what I was speaking on about the streets, they infiltrated, putting drugs into those communities, or before then, when moonshine was the illegal thing, right? They didn't care about illegal activity, people doing crime. They made those laws specifically because they knew that they could get away with it and use those laws to oppress the people, right? Allow them to infiltrate the people, like making moonshine illegal. If they truly didn't care about the black community, they would have had no problem letting them folks drink themselves or poison themselves to death or whatever the case may be. But they made that stuff illegal because they wanted their cut of the wealth generated from it. A lot of these laws is all about them taxing the streets. Because the streets have always been about making a living for themselves outside of the control of the government. So a lot of these laws are shaped around that one thing, infiltrating and controlling the wealth that's being generated outside of their control. They had to infiltrate the streets, basically. And so when it got to the point where they started encouraging through media and just in general how black people started to turn against each other after going through all that they went through slavery, which shifted them to attacking each other and all this type of stuff and infighting. There was still enough unity between black people that was still a problem. So what did they do? They started pumping drugs into the community. And then gangs started forming, which I wouldn't have doubt that they had a hand in encouraging the gangs to form up to bully and control their own communities. And then when other gangs formed up to go against, well, first, I believe the first gang was probably to defend themselves against the police. And then somewhere along the line, those gangs got corrupted and turned against each other. And don't think for a second that the white power structure did not have a hand in it. They've always been there behind the scene manipulating and controlling them, because black people have always allowed them in their business, have always viewed them as a part of their community, not understanding that they don't have your best interest at all. They are infiltrating. As far back as you can go back in time, since whenever, I believe that they have always had the mindset of infiltrating and turning the black community against themselves so that they can reap the benefits and rewards. That's how they have taken over the world. That's how they have shifted the power. And black people have always been blind to that. For one reason, because the ways of communicating and spreading knowledge were not as advanced as they are today. There were no phones, yet alone internet, right? And so that was their time. And this technology signaled that that time is over. They can no longer really hide what they're doing. So it's definitely over. But Rashad was one of the first ones to step out and wake the streets up. And another thing about the streets, right? That's why women were so attracted to the gangsters. That's where that came from, because the gangsters represented people that was actually for their community, while those dudes that was operating within the power structure were considered sellouts, house Negroes. They didn't have that respect. But over time, through manipulating the communities and infiltrating the gangs and turning everybody against each other, they have slowly played a part in their own community's destruction, because they abandoned their community for success within their system. And nowadays, you see a lot of people clinging to the mindsets of trying to shame black females into getting with them. Not long ago, it was them saying, why y'all messing with these street dudes? You know they don't give a damn about you, and all this type of stuff. And in a lot of cases, that be the case with the females, right? So they had a solid argument. But for the most part, it was not about them having a solid argument and having the best interest of the female. They just wanted the females for themselves. That's why so many of these people are so hell-bent on shaming black women online, doing this back and forth, black men this, black women that. Same thing with the women. Pointing the finger at each other, trying to get people to submit to their rules and regulations, not really understanding that their whole mindset has been shaped by the power structure. The thing about the house dudes, I'm gonna just say, because I don't really like using the term Negroes and niggas and stuff like that, but because none of us are perfect, right? This isn't an attack on these type of people, right? I'm just trying to bring understanding and awareness of how they have been manipulating our community. And people know who I'm talking about when I say house dudes versus field dudes. And so While the house dudes had more privilege within the system, they were still being, the black women were still being more empowered by the system than them. So the black women still stood in positions of power. So a lot of the house dudes were still not respected. And they didn't like that. They hated the fact that these females would choose the street dudes over them, right? Knowing that they were broken, they were buck broken and were no good to their community, they still felt like they deserved the females of the community. In the meantime, those females are steady getting with the street dudes, and the street dudes are not really street dudes anymore because they have been infiltrated. They've been turned against each other. They don't trust each other anymore. They don't even really have, because their fathers was taken, they didn't grow up with their fathers, or their parents was killed or locked up, whatever the case may be. The whole structure was disrupted. So they knew that they came from a line of family members who was in the streets, but they didn't really know how that came to be. They didn't really know what that stood for. And so really and truly, being in the streets represented standing up for your community, finding a way outside of the power structure to provide for your community. And they slowly infiltrated, turned it against itself. And that's because it was operating within the, that's why I say you have to take back your independence. You cannot support this system. You have to separate yourself from it. We are a nation trapped within a nation. That should be our mindset. We deserve our own land, our own laws, our own police, everything. We should be completely separate, because history has told us over and over again that coexistence, a peaceful coexistence, is not possible. Because they always will have their power structure, not necessarily the whole community, but their power structure will always be in control of them, first of all, because they're just that prominent within their community. The races are just that strong within their society. Majority of them are bigots. Majority of them are bigots. Majority of them are racist. Well, I say majority of them are racist. I ain't gonna say all majority of them are bigots, but definitely majority of them are racist. That's why they are able to have entire towns, like sundown towns, like what got a hold of him. That's why they're able to have entire towns that are completely corrupted and controlled in the best interest of their race and against other races. But yeah, so fast forward to the recent past, when Kevin Samuels came out, right? Kevin Samuels was in a way a broken individual himself, a house dude. Like he said it himself, he was a simp, giving his money to females, and he realized that's not giving him the respect that he wanted. So he wanted to start acting like a bad guy, like a street dude in a sense. But of course, that's not who he is, so he could never be the real thing. But he took on that persona because it worked in terms of him getting the females in the way that he wanted them. And so when he spoke, he was able to resonate with a lot of males within the black community and white community, right? Because he represented that in between house and field Negro issues. Made him very popular, but his whole mindset was about control, not necessarily to heal and help bring the people together. That was the issue. That was the disagreement that I had with him. A lot of people believe that the truths that he was saying needed to be said. That may be the case, but not to the extent in which he was doing it, right? Not in the way that he was doing it. You're not going to bully black females, especially when they're already in a position of power. You're not going to bully them into catering to you, especially when you yourself know that you're no good to the community. It's not within a female's nature to submit to lesser men. And when I say that, I mean men who are not in control of their community. White people are in control of the black community. And so it's only natural for a black woman to submit to that power structure. Now, a woken black woman who understands that that power structure does not have her best interest, she would often go through some stuff, because one thing about this power structure, they have a knack for being able to recognize who you are before you are able to recognize who you are. To recognize your rebelliousness before you are able to recognize your rebelliousness. And so you'll be getting attacked by this system, not really understanding why. And if you're strong enough, maybe you'll make it to the point where you can gain the knowledge you need to know to understand why you're being attacked. But a lot of them are just buck broken before they figure out what they were doing wrong. I mean, what was going on. And so that's where you end up with the Kevin Samuels and a lot of the females and stuff like that. They have been broken, never really understanding why. I hope I'm explaining it in a way where y'all can understand. A lot of these people have been broken without them even realizing that that's what has happened. And people like Rashad Jamal was a threat to that. He was the one bold enough to say, and he said it himself, man, when he was going through the things he was going through in the streets, waking himself up, realizing that a lot of the things he did, he shouldn't have done. He made that promise that if a spirit got him out of the situation he was in, that he would commit himself to his purpose of going against this system, and he would do it without fear. And that's what he did. He chose to be that frontline soldier. And see, that was the time when dudes in so-called positions of power should have stood up and helped, but they abandoned him. They left them to the system, for the system to do what they did to them. Lock them up, tell all type of lies and stuff like that don't make no sense, no proof whatsoever. He represented that dude that really stood for, he represent what a real street gangster type dude would really be about. Standing up for his people, waking his people up, and willing to be on that front line and doing it. It just sucks that they had too many angles to attack him from in the process, right? Turning his own people against him. Which is the case for a lot, because our family structures are so broken these days, and most of our family members are willing to sell out their family members for a little piece of pie. So it's just awareness, people, just awareness, so that you understand what's necessary to move accordingly. And for me, that means the system is no good. It's not for us. We should separate. Nobody needs to be operating in the sign, no matter what color you are. This system is all about maintaining control and power for themselves. And even if you got money and power as a black person, white person, or whatever, it's still, you still at a disadvantage, because this system is a system built by the white power structure. So if they don't consider you white, you're not gonna have equal opportunities within that system. Don't matter how dark and evil you decide to be. You will never be able to, unless you just real smart like that and you know how to, they always warring with each other, right? They always trying to take each other's spot. They always trying to take the top spot. They always going against each other. But they always work together to oppress the people. And so anybody that is in that system trying to help the people, it's not going rarely does it ever work out well. Which is why you should use your positions of power. They should have been using their positions of power to say, hey, this guy's right. The lawyers and all that stuff should have been backing this dude up, fighting to get him out of this system. Because one thing about Rashad Jamal, he could galvanize the people. The thing is, because the house dudes have gotten to a point where they feel like they can do things on their own without the street dudes, they left him out there on his own against this system. And that's basically what happened. They abandoned this dude. All the house dudes, all the house females for that matter, refused to take up, knowing that what they doing to this dude is wrong. They refuse to take up for this dude because he represents the street dudes in a light that is not the street dudes that they actually control. Because you got dudes, you got the corrupted street dudes who do their bidding. they tend to have the law on their side, or they working with the police, they working with some white people some way, somewhere, some form, and they're being used against their people, whether they know it or not. They get these deals on drugs and stuff from the white people. Them white people don't have the best interests of their community at all. So definitely the streets have very corrupted at this point, to the point where people just need to not even be a part of it anymore. Find another way. And that's what Rashad Jamal was trying to let them know. And of course the power structure couldn't have that, right? And so they did what they did to him. But she does a good job at breaking it down. I'll play a little bit of it. And so you can find the whole thing on YouTube. Type in that title. That's her channel name below the title. There you go.
I would have never told y'all the truth. I risked my whole life to tell y'all the truth, and it's the thanks I get. It's a smack in my face. You better do your research where I went to trial at in a sundown town. They are still hanging black people out there in Barrow County. They are still flying their Confederate flag full force in Barrow County.
You see a judge do often overturn a jury's verdict, but that's happened in a local murder case.
Steve Charters told me as a juror in the murder trial of Paul Hamilton, he took those words to heart. Investigators say Hamilton shot and killed Brandon Lay, who was in a car at this intersection in October 2015. They say Hamilton confronted people in the car after his home had been burglarized. The police report indicated when someone in the car grabbed Hamilton, he shot into the vehicle, saying, quote, "That's when I shot him, deader than blank."
We found him guilty of 3 counts of aggravated assault, 1 count of felony murder.
Charters, who kept detailed jury notes, says he and the other jurors came to a unanimous verdict based on the evidence. 2 weeks later, their verdict was overturned by presiding judge David Moats.
Even every lawyer that we had on the case was scared to come visit me because it was Barrow County. They still have a sign up that says, "No black people allowed after sundown in Barrow County."
You can see a little bit of the corruption that's happening there in Barrow County.
215 people were buried behind a Jacksonville, Mississippi jail in shallow graves with just a metal rod and a number, and their families were never notified. On top of that, some of the families to the people that were buried thought that they were still missing and complaining to police to find their missing loved ones. And now they're being told they have to pay a fee in order to have the bodies removed so they can give proper burials. None of this would have been discovered if it weren't for Dexter Wade going missing in March and his mother reporting it to the police and them telling her that they have no information. His mother never gave up looking for him, and it wasn't until October where she found out that her son was struck by a police officer's car an hour after he left when he was crossing a nearby interstate highway. He had identification on him, and police never notified his mother and allowed his body to sit in a county morgue. It turns out her son was one of the bodies that was buried in the grave. Mind you, she had been calling the police department every week asking if they had any information on her son, to which they said they had nothing. And then in July, because nobody apparently claimed his body, they decided to bury it. When a new investigator was added to the case, that's when she found out what happened to her son and where he was buried. And she was finally able to go to his gravesite. She broke down while praying, saying, "I'm so sorry this happened to you, but Mama didn't know, Mama didn't know." And they still made her pay to remove his body. In my opinion, I think the family members of those buried need to get together and file one fat lawsuit against the police department, because that is disgusting, to say the least.
Now do you see the corruption? I know it's in a different state, but it's also showing you why he doesn't respect police. Anyways, okay, so for the people who don't know, this is Rashad Jamal. We are currently inside of a time where history is changing, the world is changing, and the world is awakening. He has a very successful YouTube channel where he talks about history, esoteric knowledge. He talks about spirituality. I found him through my boyfriend. He had introduced me to him, and I started watching some of his videos, and it started to pop more up on TikTok, Instagram, all of these social media sites. He has a very powerful YouTube channel. He also has a website for the news and for YouTube channel that has 1.5 million subscribers to talk about you. Now, as I'm observing his case, and we're going to get into that, as I'm observing every single thing that they have put online about him, some of the stuff does not make any sense. This case that he has is something that I've taken an interest in, and I really want people to know about it because, it relates to history. It relates to everything that has been told to us about their whole platform being brought down. You know how many times Young Pharaoh's platform been brought down? Well, let me just show you an example of what they were doing to melanated leaders before his generation. Have y'all noticed that the rulers of this matrix eliminate anything that they can't control? And TikTok, I know the rulers of this government is trying to control the media, so I'm gonna just say this is fake for educational purposes and scripted. If they can't control it or they can't get their hands on it, they terminate you. Extraterrestrials, aliens, if you're watching this, please help. For example, let's talk about these police and CIA agents who have been on their deathbed confessing about people they have killed and covering up their deaths. Pretty sure we all know who Dr. Sebi is, but if you don't, he was the man who was known to cure arthritis, sickle cell, HIV, diabetes, and you name it. He got arrested, went to jail, and died from pneumonia. A herbalist. For example, Bob Marley. Don't you forget about Martin Luther King. Found guilty of assassination. Let's talk about Malcolm X.
The FBI and New York police departments are facing new calls to finally open their records related to the assassination of Malcolm X. This comes after the release of a deathbed confession of a former undercover New York police officer who admitted to being part of a broad New York police and FBI conspiracy targeting Malcolm.
Or what about the doctors who have found cancer-causing situations or even cure for cancer, found with gunshot wounds in their chest, suicide by shooting themselves in the back of the head, or just dying of natural causes? It made laws to say that we cannot vote. We have to take literacy tests. We can't live in specific places. They have upgraded and created these amendments to seem ethical. But the same situations keep happening. These laws in the original Constitution and everything that plays a part with that was never